Yes, you heard it right. Sumit Singh, Jenny Slatten's husband, has been arrested. In the sparkling but often deceptive world of reality television, love stories capture our attention and seem perfect, but behind the cameras, the truth can be much darker. Sumit Singh became trapped in nearly $280,000 of debt through online gambling. Not only did he gamble away money, but he also pressured Jenny again and again to help pay off his secret debt. When he failed to repay what he owed, a lawsuit was filed. Soon after, he was arrested. The court's verdict was clear. Sumit was sentenced to 1 year in prison. With this truth exposed, Jenny's situation became even more tragic. She had lived under constant mental pressure and numerous struggles, and finally, she had no choice but to divorce him. Jenny Slatten ended her marriage to Sumit Singh. Later, to move forward and begin a new life, she decided to marry a man named Zach. This story is more than just a failed romance. It is a cautionary tale about secrets, betrayal, and survival. To truly understand the magnitude of the betrayal, we must look at what was at stake. Jenny was not the typical reality star. She was a woman from Palm Springs, California, nearing retirement when she found herself caught up in an unexpected romance. Like many modern love stories, it began online. Casual conversations grew into something deeper. Across the world in India, Sumit Singh was equally captivated. He was decades younger, full of adventure, and determined to prove that age was just a number. When Jenny first appeared on 90 Day Fiancé, The Other Way, viewers saw her as a hopeful romantic. She left behind her comfortable life in America to pursue love in India. For many, her courage was inspiring. Friends and family questioned her choices, but Jenny never wavered. To her, love was worth any sacrifice. Sumit, in those early days, played the role of the perfect partner. He supported her through culture shock, stood against his conservative family, and promised a future filled with happiness. On the surface, their love looked like a fairy tale. An older American woman and a younger Indian man finding each other against all odds. But beneath the surface, cracks were already forming. Behind Sumit's reassuring smiles, there were secrets Jenny could not see. She believed she had found her soulmate, but the truth was waiting to surface. Their early years were turbulent, filled with challenges, constant family objections, financial strain, and whispers from outsiders who doubted their future. Jenny fought against every obstacle, certain love would conquer cultural differences. For a while, it seemed she was right. But hidden beneath everything was a darker secret, one that would eventually destroy their marriage, drag Sumit into court, and leave Jenny devastated. As the cameras rolled and fans cheered them on, Sumit was living a double life. With Jenny, he promised loyalty and love. Behind her back, temptation and addiction slowly consumed him. Jenny thought she had crossed the world for love, but in truth, she had stepped into a storm that would engulf her life. At first, their romance seemed like hope itself. They had survived distance, criticism, and endless judgment from both sides of the globe. But soon, cracks began to widen. The most obvious came from Sumit's family. His parents had always disapproved. In India, where cultural traditions run deep, their age gap was shocking. Jenny was old enough to be his mother. His parents saw their relationship not as love, but as shame. Jenny carried that rejection heavily. She wanted desperately to be accepted, to be welcomed into his family, but each attempt failed. His parents were cold, skeptical, sometimes cruel. For Jenny, it was painful. For Sumit, it was suffocating. He loved her, but he longed for his parents' approval, something he would never receive. The tension wore them down. Arguments lasted longer. Laughter faded. Silence filled spaces once full of joy. Jenny asked him again and again, "Why won't they let us be happy?" But family rejection wasn't the only problem. Subtle signs emerged. Small moments didn't add up. Sumit grew distracted, restless, anxious. He spent nights on his phone or laptop, whispering to himself. Jenny assumed it was stress, but the patterns were strange. Some nights he was cheerful, almost euphoric. Other nights he was dark, moody, and unreachable. Jenny convinced herself it was pressure. She told herself he's tired. He's dealing with stress. But the truth was different. Sumit was sinking deeper into an addiction Jenny couldn't imagine. Money soon became a recurring issue. Jenny, living off her limited retirement savings, started noticing inconsistencies. Bills weren't paid on time. Bank balances didn't match. When she asked, Sumit brushed it aside, just a late payment, a mistake, or a misunderstanding. Jenny chose to believe him. She had given up her entire life for him. Her home, her comfort, her country. To doubt him felt like betraying herself. So she chose trust, not suspicion. But love can blind, and Jenny was no exception. To outsiders, Jenny and Sumit still looked like a couple who had beaten the odds. But inside, the cracks widened, threatening to tear their marriage apart. Jenny's story was about to shift from romance to survival. For months, she ignored the late nights, the sudden mood swings, the unexplained gaps in their finances. She believed Sumit when he said he was just tired. She convinced herself every relationship had ups and downs. But what she didn't know was that her husband was fighting a battle he was already losing. It started innocently. At least that's what Sumit told himself. A game of online poker, a bet on a cricket match. The platforms were easy to access, just a few clicks away. He was drawn in by flashing lights, spinning reels, the illusion of fortune. Gambling gave him escape. When his parents rejected Jenny, when people whispered about their age difference, when reality became too heavy, he turned to betting. The adrenaline made him feel alive. At first, the losses were small. A few $100s here, a small win there. Jenny never noticed. When she asked, he laughed it off, just a little fun. But gambling never stays small. Wins made him bold. Losses made him desperate. Soon, the numbers grew. Thousands became tens of thousands. Every loss was followed by promises of the next win. But the hole only grew deeper. By the time Jenny realized something was truly wrong, Sumit was already buried in nearly $280,000 of debt. The scale was staggering. He had borrowed from online lenders, maxed out credit cards, and taken loans with crushing interest. Debt collectors started circling. The pressure mounted, and Sumit turned to Jenny, demanding help. He pressured her to cover his debt. Arguments grew sharper, more painful. Jenny was exhausted, manipulated, and broken down. Finally, the truth came out. When he failed to repay, lawsuits followed. The court exposed his addiction and his hidden debts. The verdict sentenced him to a year in prison. Jenny's world collapsed. She had crossed continents, given up her life in America, and endured endless struggles for love. Instead, she found betrayal and ruin. Under immense pressure, she ended the marriage. Jenny divorced Sumit Singh. Later, she found the strength to rebuild. She started a new life and eventually married a man named Zach. What began as a love story that captivated fans became a cautionary tale about trust, secrets, and survival. Jenny's journey showed the painful truth. Sometimes the love we fight for the hardest hides the deepest betrayals. Every day, the pressure grew heavier. Collection emails filled Sumit's inbox. Anonymous phone calls demanded repayment. And still, he could not stop. Jenny began noticing changes in his behavior. He was nervous around the phone, always rushing to answer calls. His hands trembled whenever he logged onto his laptop late at night. There were unexplained withdrawals from their shared account. When Jenny asked questions, he grew defensive, snapping at her. "Why are you always doubting me? Don't you trust me?" he barked, shifting the blame onto her. Jenny, hurt but still clinging to the man she had sacrificed everything for, backed down. "Of course, I trust you, Sumit. I left everything for you," she whispered. But deep inside, her instincts told her something was terribly wrong. Sumit's addiction was not only financial, it was emotional. His moods rose and fell with every bet. When he won, he was euphoric, showering Jenny with affection, acting like the partner she had fallen in love with. But when he lost, he was distant, irritable, sometimes cruel. Jenny began to feel as though she was living with two different men, one who promised her the world and another who was drowning in obsession. The tragedy of addiction is that it never stays hidden forever. Secrets always find their way to the surface, and Sumit's secret was about to crash into the open point one evening. Jenny stumbled upon a string of emails while using his laptop. They weren't messages from friends or family. They were notices from lenders, debt collectors, and gambling platforms. The subject lines made her blood run cold. Final notice. Immediate payment required. Account overdue. Jenny's hands shook as she read the amounts, thousands upon thousands owed to strangers she had never heard of. Her heart sank with every line. The man she thought she knew, the man she had given up her entire life for, was living a double life. When she confronted him, his face drained of color. At first, he denied it. Then he tried to shift the blame, claiming gambling was just a way to cope with stress. But Jenny pressed harder, and finally, the truth spilled out. The loans, the losses, the staggering $280,000 debt that now hung over both of them like a noose. Jenny felt the world collapse around her. Every sacrifice she had made suddenly seemed meaningless. She had crossed continents for love, only to be left stranded in betrayal. But Sumit didn't just confess. He begged. He pleaded with Jenny to help him pay off the debt. He insisted they could overcome it together, that love meant standing by each other through the worst. But for Jenny, it was no longer about money. It was about trust. And trust, once shattered, is almost impossible to repair. What Jenny didn't realize then was that this secret wasn't only going to cost her peace of mind. It was going to drag her into a legal storm that would change both of their lives forever. The cracks in their marriage were no longer hidden. They had split wide open, and the world was about to see how far their fall would go. Death has a way of multiplying. What begins as a single mistake can snowball into something unmanageable. For Sumit, the $280,000 he owed wasn't just a number on a screen. It was a storm he could no longer outrun. And for Jenny, it was the beginning of the darkest chapter of her life. At first, Jenny tried to believe in him. When he tearfully confessed, she clung to the hope that it was a mistake, a one-time fall, something they could somehow recover from together. She told herself, love is forgiveness. Maybe if I stand by him, he'll change. But Sumit wasn't changing. Instead of pulling back from his addiction, he doubled down. He convinced himself that the only way to escape debt was to gamble his way out of it. One big win, he told himself. Just one win, and everything will be fine. The loans will be paid, Jenny will forgive me. Even my parents might respect me again. But that win never came. Each loss drove him deeper into desperation. Online lenders charged crushing interest rates. Collection calls grew more aggressive. Some creditors threatened legal action. And still, Sumit went back to the very platforms that had ruined him. Jenny, meanwhile, lived in constant anxiety. She was retired, with limited savings, and had never imagined being dragged into chaos like this in her golden years. Suddenly, every grocery trip felt heavier. Every bill suffocating. Nights once filled with laughter now echoed with silence and fear. Sumit's pressure grew unbearable. He begged Jenny to cover his debts. He told her she was his only hope, that without her, everything would collapse. At first, Jenny resisted. I can't do this, Sumit. I don't have that kind of money. I came here for love, not to pay off your mistakes, she cried. But he pushed harder. His words turned from pleading to guilt-tripping. Didn't you say you'd stand by me no matter what? Didn't you leave your whole life for me? Then prove it. Help me. Lend me something, anything. Jenny felt trapped. She had sacrificed so much already, and now the man she had trusted with her heart was demanding her financial security too. Behind the scenes, creditors were circling. Some sent official letters. Others showed up in person, banging on their door with harsh demands. Jenny began to fear answering the phone or opening the mailbox. Every knock felt like a threat. Worse, whispers of Sumit's death spread through their community. Neighbors and acquaintances began to talk. Jenny, once admired by 90-Day Fiancé fans for her bravery and love, now felt humiliated. The man she loved was drowning, and he was pulling her down with him. The breaking point came when Jenny discovered that Sumit had secretly pawned her belongings. Jewelry, electronics, even sentimental items, all gone to buy himself more time. When she confronted him, his response was cold. I had no choice, he said flatly. It was that, or let them come after me harder. Jenny's heart shattered. This wasn't just debt anymore. It was betrayal staring her in the face. The numbers climbed higher. Interest piled upon interest until repayment was impossible. What began as gambling losses had turned into a legal nightmare. Creditors filed complaints, lawyers became involved, and whispers of lawsuits soon turned into reality. Jenny spent sleepless nights staring at the ceiling, asking herself, how did I end up here? She had crossed oceans for love, fought for a marriage no one believed in, and now it was collapsing under lies and debt. The debt wasn't just financial anymore. It consumed everything: her emotions, her spirit, her peace of mind. And with each passing day, Jenny realized she might not be able to save Sumit or their marriage. But creditors weren't interested in love or heartbreak. They wanted repayment. And when repayment never came, they took the only step left. They filed suit against Sumit Singh. Suddenly, the story of Jenny and Sumit was no longer just about a broken marriage. It had become a courtroom drama. Debt is not just numbers on a page. It is weight. It is shadow. It follows you morning to night. For Jenny, that shadow turned into a scream. By now, the truth was undeniable. Sumit Singh had lost nearly $280,000 to online gambling. Lawsuits loomed. Creditors stalked them. And the life Jenny had dreamed of, a simple love in India, was slipping further away with every passing day. But Sumit wasn't just drowning himself. He was dragging Jenny down too. His begging turned from desperation to manipulation. Jenny, please, you're all I have. If you don't help me, I'll lose everything. Jenny's heart ached, but she tried to stand firm. Sumit, I can't. I don't have that kind of money. My savings aren't endless. Still, he pressed. You get a pension. You must have something saved. Just help me with a little bit. I'll pay it back. I swear. Jenny shook her head. She had already given him more than she could afford. And still the debt ballooned. Still the creditors came. Finally, his words turned cruel. So all those times you said you loved me were lies? You won't even help me when I need you most? After everything I've done for you? Jenny's hands trembled. She had fought his family, endured ridicule, sacrificed her entire life. And now the man she had trusted most was using her love as a weapon. It was the breaking point. The marriage that had once promised hope and joy was now nothing but betrayal and despair. And the world would soon know how completely it had collapsed, that somehow she was the villain in his story. The pressure grew heavier. Each morning began with questions about money. Each night ended with arguments. Jenny no longer felt like a wife. She felt like a hostage trapped between her love for some mate and the crushing reality of what he was asking her to sacrifice. The worst part was the fear. The fear that if she didn't help him, something terrible would happen. Sumit's moods were unpredictable. At times he was frantic, pacing the apartment, muttering to himself. At other times he was cold and silent, staring at the wall as if lost in a darkness Jenny could never reach. She started to fear what he might do, not just to himself, but to her. The creditors added to the nightmare. Phone calls became relentless. Some were polite, but firm, demanding repayment. Others were threatening, their voices sharp and intimidating. Jenny often froze when the phone rang, her stomach twisting into knots. Neighbors began to whisper. People in their building had noticed the visits from debt collectors, the arguments that spilled into the hallways, the late-night shouting. Matches. Jenny, once proud of the love she had defended on television, now felt humiliated and ashamed. There was no peace left. Sumit's demands reached a breaking point one evening when he stood over Jenny, his voice shaking with anger. If you don't help me, Jenny, they'll ruin me. Do you understand? They'll take everything and it'll be on. You're my wife. You're supposed to help me. Jenny, her eyes filled with tears, whispered the only truth she had left. I can't save you, Sumit. Not from this. Not from yourself. The words hung heavy in the air. For the first time, Jenny allowed herself to see what was happening. This wasn't just about debt. This was about control. This was about a man who had gambled away not just money, but trust, love, and the very foundation of their marriage. Still, the pressure never stopped. Each day brought new demands, new fights, new heartbreak. And, slowly, Jenny realized something she had never wanted to admit. Love alone was Not enough anymore. The woman who had left everything behind for love was now being asked to give up the last thing she had, her dignity, her safety, and her sanity. Jenny's heart was breaking. And soon so would their marriage, because the more precious Sumit placed on her, the more certain she became that their love story was over. The truth always has a way of surfacing. You can bury it under lies, cover it with excuses, or distract with empty promises, but eventually it rises. And for Jenny Slatten, the truth about Sumit Singh's double life came crashing down in a way she could no longer ignore. For weeks, Jenny had lived under suffocating pressure. The constant begging, the relentless phone calls, the late night arguments that left her in tears. She had given Sumit the benefit of the doubt more times than she could count. She had told herself he was stressed, that maybe he exaggerated the numbers, that perhaps things weren't as dire as they seemed. But the truth was far worse than she ever imagined. It began with an envelope, a thick official-looking packet that arrived by courier one humid afternoon. Jenny's name wasn't on it, but the address matched theirs. With trembling hands, she placed it on the table, waiting for Sumi to come home. But curiosity and fear gnawed at her. She opened it. Inside were documents, stamped and signed, detailing Najwit's filed against Sumit Singh. The numbers leaped off the page. $280,000. In outstanding debt with multiple creditors demanding immediate repayment. Interest charges, legal fees, threats of asset seizures, and the most chilling line of all, a notice of pending court action. Jenny's heart sank. The excuses he had fed her, the small losses, the temporary setbacks were lies. Every word he had spoken was carefully crafted to hide the scale of his destruction. By the time Sumit walked through the door that evening, Jenny was waiting. The paper spread across the table like evidence in a courtroom. "Explain this," she demanded, her voice shaking with anger. Sumit froze, his face drained of color. For a moment, he tried to deny it, reaching for excuses. "These aren't what you think. They're just misunderstandings, paperwork errors." But Jenny cut him off. "Stop lying to me. $280,000, Sumit. You told me it wasn't that bad. You told me you had it under control. Do you even know what you've done?" The apartment fell silent, the weight of her words pressing down on them both. Sum sank into a chair, his head in his hands. For the first time, the bravado was gone. The charm, the excuses, the guilt tripping, all of it collapsed under the mountain of truth. "I didn't mean for it to get this far," he whispered. "I thought I could fix it. I thought I could win it back." Jenny's eyes filled with tears, but not of sympathy. These were tears of betrayal. "You didn't just lose money, Sumit. You lost me. You lost everything we built." The confrontation opened a floodgate. Jenny began connecting the dots. The porn belongings, the strange visitors, the endless nights glued to his laptop. Every odd behavior suddenly made sense. The man she had defended to the world, the man she had believed in when no one else did, had been hiding a secret that threatened not only their marriage, but her very sanity. That night, Jenny barely slept. She replayed every moment of their relationship, every sacrifice she had made. She remembered the ridicule she endured from strangers online, the scorn from Sumit's family, the whispers from neighbors. Through it all, she had stood tall, believing that love would be enough. But love cannot survive lies this big. The next morning, she made a choice. For the first time, Jenny began to think not about saving Sumit, but about saving herself.